Borderlands 4 just had some insane new launch details. We'll also cover some warnings that you should be aware of, just so that you are fully prepared for launch. Additionally, we'll cover some brand new intel, especially surrounding the endgame as well as the core gameplay loop. We also got to go over some discrepancies with the launch that you might be confused on. We got a ton to talk about. What's up, World Utopia here, back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Borderlands 4. Okay, so first off, let's go over what's happening with launch. We'll go over some of the launch details, the discrepancies, and even a few warnings there. So if you haven't seen, Borderlands 4 actually did release its official launch times. So again, with that, I will cover the confusion on some of this. So currently it is showing different times for PC and console. So we'll use NA as an example here. Now they only show Pacific time and Eastern time, but I'm going to include all of them. So for example here, the consoles actually do launch on September 12th at 12 a.m. and that one is specific to Eastern time. So for Central time, that means 11 p.m. on September 11th. For Los Angeles or Pacific time, that means 9 p.m. again on September 11th. So it can depend on your region there for what date the game is actually launching. Now, as you'll see here, the PC time is actually a little bit different. So for PC, it actually is a global release time to everybody at the same time. However, consoles actually do have a different time depending on your region. So first, to cover PC side of things, and again, starting from Eastern time on PC, this is actually September 11th now. So console was September 12th at 12 a.m. However, the PC release in Eastern time or New York, etc., that one is actually September 11th at 12 p.m. So PC does get to play the game 12 hours earlier than the console release over there in New York. That actually does apply as a whole for NA. So for Pacific time here, that's 9 p.m. for consoles on September 11th. However, for PC, that's 9 a.m. on September 11th. So again, 12 hours earlier. That also does again apply to Central time, which would be 11 p.m. for consoles, but 11 a.m. for PC. Now here's where the discrepancy gets a little bit confusing. If you are on console, it actually does cut off at 12 a.m. So even though NA in the region entirely has 9 p.m. for consoles for some region and 12 a.m. for New York or Eastern time, that actually does cut off for the rest of the world. So depending on your location, if you're in Paris or if you're in Singapore or even New Zealand, those are still going to launch at 12 a.m. on September 12th. So that technically is not a global release, that is dependent on your region. The difference and the discrepancy here is that New Zealand launches at 12 a.m. on September 12th, at least for the console release. That does actually mean that the first people to be playing Borderlands will actually be the console release players that are in New Zealand. Or there is the New Zealand trick that people do where they swap the region to that. So yes, PC players do get to play first, but technically actually New Zealand is actually the first to play. And they're going to be playing a whole 4 hours before any PC release, which would be 7 a.m. Central Time. So the players that are from New Zealand or the ones that swap their region to it that are on the console platform, they will be the first playing at 7 a.m. CST. Again, I hope that does clear things up here. I'll have a bit of a data table to kind of avoid the confusion here. I'll also include a link to a time conversion where you can convert each and every single time here. So there's a bit of discrepancy there. I've seen a ton of confusion both on different social media platforms as well as the Discord and even YouTube. So hopefully that one does clear that up. Now here's another fair warning here. This is for all players, whether you're on PlayStation, Xbox, or even PC. Currently, it looks like the launch size might be around 100 gigabytes, which is an absolute insane size for a download, especially for people like me who have much slower internet. So if you do have slower internet or just in general, you might be wondering when/if we're getting a pre-download. Well, unfortunately, we don't have any official information just yet. However, what we can do here is piece previous Borderlands releases together and see when and if we might get a pre-download. So I have compiled a little data sheet here to showcase all the different pre-download times and when they were available or if they were available. So there are a few discrepancies on this list. The one here that you might be seeing is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was actually not available to pre-download on Epic's client. This was because it was Epic exclusive. However, the PlayStation and Xbox versions had 2 and 3 day pre-downloads. However, the Steam releases for PC dating back all the way to 2012 actually always had a pre-download. And this also did apply to Borderlands 3 weirdly enough, even though it was on Epic Games. Because it had a Steam release as well, the Steam release had a 3-day early pre-download, where the Epic client had a 2-day early pre-download. The rest do vary here depending on their platform. Of course, much older games that were on the PlayStation 3 and the 360, those didn't have pre-downloads. but the newer gen consoles did, typically around 2 to 3 days, and the prequel getting the most, which had 4 and 5 day pre-downloads. So I would assume here we're more than likely going to get a pre-download available 2 to 3 days depending on the platform. That should hopefully apply across the board, but I would more than likely assume that Steam and the PlayStation, Xbox will get their pre-downloads. The Epic client here being the kind of iffy one. So if you did want to still buy through Epic Games, you could, but do be wary you might not get a pre-download given the previous extent of it. Although, as said before, with Borderlands 3, they did have a pre-download, but the newer one from 2022, that did not get a pre-download. Again, just a bit of a fair warning there. We can also infer here that there might actually be a day one patch as well, so do be wary on that of course too. Another notable mention here pointed out by another user. This is over on the subreddit. Currently, they did buy the Borderlands 4 with a key, so it is currently not in their library as of just yet. So if you did purchase a key or from a third-party website, it might not be in your Steam library just yet. Again, that more than likely will unlock with the pre-download or at least a few days before launch. So I wouldn't worry too much on that one. I've had this happen with several other game releases, especially when I do get provided a code. It sometimes doesn't show up in your library right away. Moving on from the launch stuff, we actually had some endgame things and even some developer comments. So yes, Borderlands 4 just released its official launch week trailer, and they also dropped a Beyond the Borderlands for the endgame. So we'll go over some of the new details that they did unveil. Now again, I do have a video on this kind of breaking down everything to expect with this, but there are some new notable mentions. So a bit of a recap for those two. They do go on to talk about the core gameplay loop here, at least pertaining to the endgame, is to grind bosses for targeted loot pools. Obviously, that's always the case with these games. You can fine-tune your action skill trees for your build, and stack your firmware gear to min-max performance. Again, we'll go over those last two, of course, the action skills and the firmware gear. Where first off, the firmware is the new gear system. Now this will only drop on non-weapon gear. So that applies to your ordnance, your shields, your class mod, enhancements, and your rep kits. If you collect 3 pieces within a firmware gear set, that is the full set bonus. And even one piece here will grant you a tier 1 bonus. Each firmware has 3 tier effects. These drops are exclusive to the UVHM. So yes, they finally do have a gear set system in Borderlands where you can get those set bonuses. Now, UVHM is the ultimate Vault Hunter mode that is unlocked right after the campaign. They're going to throw you into a bit of a tutorial chain here where you can then rank up by completing world challenges. And then that also pertains to a capstone with weekly wildcard missions to advance those tiers. So they do have rotating missions each week with enemies that roll with mutator style traits. And the really cool thing here is that with the weekly wildcards, there is a guaranteed legendary drop at the end. So you will get at least one there when doing those. So they don't feel like a time waste there, you are at least getting one legendary. Now they do also mention the endgame is packed with live events. These are going to be weekly event changes with more currency drops, new enemy mixes, and even community challenges. That the endgame is actually built for daily and weekly replay value, so you're going to get a ton of time, not just out of the campaign, but also after the endgame. So it is really good to see that there. Again, there are a few other notable mentions here, like Moxie's big Encore machine and specialization trees that do unlock after the endgame. I've broken those down and gone in depth those in another video, where I cover all of those details. But to go through them quickly, the big Encore does have the new boss missions. Again, changing those out each week. Specializations unlocked after the campaign. You collect specialization points as you do level up. And that will actually replace your Guardian rank, which you do get during the campaign. And you also unlock socketable behaviors up to 4. Again, these are going to be build enhancers that you can then apply to. I'll break these down maybe more when we do actually get the launch of the game. But again, I already have a video on it, so if you want to check that out, you can. There was one last mention here. Now, this is a major spoiler, so this is the last thing I'm going to cover. If you wanted to at this point, you can exit out now. Again, this is a major spoiler. So it seems like they accidentally included this in the recent Beyond the Endgame trailer, where it does actually show that Lilith is returning. Now they showcase this with the wildcard missions, but essentially she does talk to you during this mission. And from the comments, it seems like this probably wasn't supposed to be put out there, but yeah, she does return for Borderlands 4. And she also did get a bit of a redesign here. Seems like fans are really enjoying that as well. So pretty cool there, just figured I'd mention it at the very end. Overall, that's about covered today's video. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe, and until the next one. Deuces.